The thunder rolled across the valley like a warning from heaven itself, and Thomas knew he was in for one of those storms that would keep him awake all night. He pulled his worn coat tighter around his shoulders as he made his way back from the fields, his boots sinking into the muddy path that led to his small cottage. The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and heavy, and he quickened his pace. Thomas had lived alone on this patch of land for 3 years now, ever since his mother passed and left him the small farm that barely produced enough to keep him fed. At 28, he had long given up on the idea that love would find him in this forgotten corner of the world. His days were filled with tending to his vegetables, caring for his 3 chickens, and fixing whatever the last storm had broken. It was a simple life, perhaps a lonely one, but it was his. The rain began in earnest as he reached the bend in the road where the old oak tree stood, sentinel. That's when he saw her, a figure in white, sitting on the stone wall that bordered the Hendersons' abandoned property. Even through the sheets of rain, he could see she was crying, her shoulders shaking with each sob that the wind carried to his ears. Thomas stopped dead in his tracks. On all his years walking this path, he had never seen anyone here, especially not someone dressed in what appeared to be a wedding gown. The white fabric was already soaked through, clinging to her small frame as she sat hunched over, her face buried in her hands. "Miss," he called out, raising his voice above the storm. Are you all right?" She looked up then, and even in the dim light of the storm, Thomas felt his breath catch. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost ethereal, with dark hair that had escaped from what must have been an elaborate style, now hanging in wet tendrils around her face. Her eyes were large and filled with tears, and when she looked at him, there was such pain in them that Thomas felt his heart constrict. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Please, I can't. I don't know where to go." Without hesitation, Thomas approached her, his mind racing with questions he didn't dare ask. "You'll catch your death out here," he said gently, shrugging off his coat and draping it around her shoulders. "My cottage isn't much, but it's warm and dry. Will you let me help you?" She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he could be trusted. Then, slowly, she nodded. Thomas helped her to her feet, surprised by how delicate she felt, like a bird with a broken wing. She stumbled slightly, and he steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "I'm Thomas," he said, as they began the slow walk to his cottage. "Thomas Whitmore." "Isabella," she replied, her voice so soft he almost missed it over the sound of the rain. "Isabella Fairmont." The name meant nothing to Thomas, but the way she said it, with a mixture of pride and shame, suggested it should. He filed the information away for later, focusing instead on getting them both out of the storm. His cottage was modest, just 2 rooms with a kitchen area and a stone fireplace that served as the heart of the home. Thomas quickly set about building up the fire, while Isabella stood dripping in the doorway, looking lost and overwhelmed. "Please, sit," he urged, gesturing to the chair closest to the fireplace. "I'll get you something dry to wear and some hot tea." He disappeared into his bedroom and returned with his warmest sweater and a pair of clean trousers. They would be far too large for her, but they were dry and warm. "The bedroom is yours," he said, setting the clothes on the chair beside her. "I'll sleep by the fire. There's a quilt in the chest at the foot of the bed." Isabella looked up at him with those remarkable eyes, and for a moment Thomas thought she might speak. Instead, she simply nodded and whispered, "Thank you." While she changed, Thomas busied himself in the kitchen, heating water for tea and searching through his meager supplies for something that might serve as a proper meal. He settled on bread and cheese, adding some of the apple preserves his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had given him last autumn. It wasn't much, but it was what he had to offer. When Isabella emerged from the bedroom, she looked almost childlike in his oversized clothes. The sweater hung to her knees, and she had rolled the sleeves up several times. Her hair was still damp, but she had combed it back from her face, revealing the delicate bone structure that spoke of good breeding and a life very different from his own. "You must think me mad," she said, settling into the chair by the fire. Running around in the rain in a wedding dress like some character from a Gothic novel, Thomas handed her a cup of steaming tea, their fingers brushing briefly as she took it. "I think you're someone who's had something terrible happen to them," he said simply. I think you're very brave for surviving it. Isabella's eyes filled with tears again, and she took a shaky sip of her tea. I don't feel brave. I feel like a coward. Would you like to tell me what happened? Thomas asked gently, settling into the chair across from her. Sometimes talking about it helps. Isabella was quiet for so long that Thomas began to think she wouldn't answer. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. And outside the storm continued its assault on the small cottage. Finally, she spoke. I was supposed to be married today, she began, her voice steady but her hands trembling around the teacup, to a man my father chose for me. A good match, he said. Advantageous for our family's business interests. Thomas said nothing, sensing that she needed to tell this story in her own way, at her own pace. Richard Blackwood, she continued, and there was something bitter in the way she said the name. Heir to the Blackwood shipping fortune. Handsome. Wealthy. Respectable. Everything a woman could want, according to my father. But not what you wanted, Thomas observed quietly. Isabella met his eyes across the firelight. No, not what I wanted at all. But it wasn't about what I wanted. It was about saving our family from financial ruin. My father's business has been failing for months, and this marriage was supposed to be our salvation. She set down her teacup and wrapped Thomas's coat more tightly around herself. I tried to be dutiful, tried to convince myself that I could learn to love him, or at least respect him. But then, what happened? Thomas prompted gently when she trailed off. This morning, just before the ceremony, I overheard Richard talking to his friend. They were laughing about the marriage, about how my father was so desperate, he was practically paying Richard to take me off his hands. And Richard said, Isabella's voice broke slightly, said that once he had control of my father's business, he would have no more use for his plain little wife. That he would install me in some remote country house and continue his life in London as if I didn't exist. Thomas felt a surge of anger toward this Richard Blackwood, whoever he was. The idea that anyone could see Isabella as plain was absurd, but more than that, the casual cruelty of the man's words made his blood boil. So you ran, he said. Isabella nodded. I ran right out of the church, still in my wedding dress. Must have looked like a madwoman. I don't even remember how I got here. I just kept walking until I couldn't walk anymore. Where is here exactly? Thomas asked. I mean, where were you supposed to be married? St. Bartholomew's in Millbrook? Isabella replied. About 15 miles from here, I think. I've been walking for hours. Thomas knew Millbrook. It was the county seat, a place where the wealthy had their grand houses and their grand weddings. The fact that Isabella had walked 15 miles in a wedding dress and evening slippers spoke to her desperation. Family will be worried, he said carefully. Isabella's laugh was hollow. My family will be humiliated. The scandal of a bride running away from her own wedding. It will be in all the papers by tomorrow. My father will never forgive me, and yet you did it anyway. Yes, she said, meeting his eyes with a newfound strength. I did it anyway. Because I realized that some things are worse than disappointing. Your family? Some things are worse than scandal and gossip and financial ruin. Thomas studied her face in the firelight, seeing not just beauty, but courage and intelligence and a strength that she clearly didn't recognize in herself. What will you do now? Isabella was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. No, she admitted. I have nowhere to go, no money of my own, no skills that would allow me to support myself. In the eyes of society, I'm ruined. No respectable family will take me in, and no decent man will have me. That's not true, Thomas said firmly. Isabella looked at him with surprise. Isn't it? I'm a woman who abandoned her wedding, who brought shame on her family name. What decent man would want such a woman? Thomas felt his heart skip a beat as he looked at her, this brave, beautiful woman who had risked everything for the chance at something real. One who understands that real decency has nothing to do with society's rules, he said quietly. One who sees that running away from a loveless marriage isn't cowardice. It's the bravest thing a person can do. Something shifted in Isabella's expression, a softening around her eyes that made Thomas's breath catch. "You're very kind, Thomas Whitmore," she said, "kinder than I deserve." "You deserve much more kindness than the world has shown you," Thomas replied. "And you're welcome to stay here as long as you need to figure out what comes next." Outside, the storm was beginning to quiet, the thunder moving off into the distance. Inside the cottage, something was just begin. Secrets unveiled, Thomas woke to the smell of bread baking and the sound of soft humming coming from his kitchen. For a moment he lay still on his makeshift bed by the fireplace, wondering if he had dreamed the entire previous evening. But then, Isabella appeared in the doorway. Wearing his clothes and an apron she must have found in one of his kitchen drawers, flour dusting her hands and a tentative smile on her face. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "I wanted to do something to thank you for your kindness. I found flour and yeast in your pantry, so I made bread, and there are eggs from your chickens for breakfast." Thomas sat up, running a hand through his hair. In the morning light streaming through his small windows, Isabella looked even more beautiful than she had by firelight. But there was something different about her, a calmness that hadn't been there the night before. But she didn't need to do that, he said, standing and folding the blanket he had used. "You're a guest here." "I'm an uninvited guest who appeared on your doorstep in the middle of a storm," Isabella corrected. "The least I can do is make myself useful." Over breakfast, fresh bread with butter, scrambled eggs, and strong tea, they talked more easily than Thomas would have thought possible. Isabella asked about his farm, about his life in this quiet corner of the world, and she listened to his answers with genuine interest. In return, she told him about her life in Millbrook, about the endless social obligations and the suffocating expectations that had shaped her days. "I always envied people like you," she admitted as they sat at his small table. "People who could choose their own path, who didn't have to live their lives according to someone else's plan." "It's not always as free as it looks," Thomas said with a rueful smile. "When you're as poor as I am, your choices are pretty limited too. I work every day just to keep food on the table and a roof over my head." "But it's honest work," Isabella said. "Work that you choose to do, not because someone expects it of you or because it serves some larger social purpose, but because it's what you want to do." Thomas considered this. "I suppose that's true. I've never thought of it that way before." They spent the morning working together in his garden, Isabella insisting on helping despite Thomas's protests that a lady shouldn't be doing such work. She proved surprisingly capable, following his instructions for weeding and watering with careful attention. Her hands, which had clearly never done manual labor before, became dirty and scratched, but she didn't complain. "I like this," she said as they worked side by side in the vegetable patch. "I like feeling useful, like I'm creating something instead of just existing." "No," Thomas glanced at her, noting the way the sun caught in her hair and the look of concentration on her face as she carefully tended his tomato plants. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like," he found himself saying. "I mean, if you want to. I know it's not much here, and you're probably used to finer things." Isabella stopped what she was doing and looked at him directly. "Thomas, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you last night." There was something in her tone that made Thomas's stomach clench with sudden anxiety. "What is it?" Isabella sat back on her heels, wiping her dirty hands on the apron. "My running away yesterday? It's going to cause problems. It's not just for me, but potentially for anyone who helps me. My father is a powerful man, and Richard Blackwood's family has influence throughout the county. They'll be looking for me. And when they find me... What are you saying?" Thomas asked, though he was beginning to understand. "I'm saying that if they discover I'm here, they could make life very difficult for you. They could claim you kidnapped me, or that you're holding me against my will. They have the money and the connections to make those kinds of accusations stick, regardless of the truth." Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Are you warning me to send you away?" "I'm giving you the choice," Isabella said quietly. "I should have given it to you last night, but I was so desperate, so grateful to find kindness. I didn't think about what it might cost you." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had told him. He thought about his simple life, his quiet existence that suddenly felt precious and fragile. Then he looked at Isabella, looked at her and saw not just beauty, but courage and goodness, and a kind of strength that impressed him more than any amount of wealth or social standing ever could. "There's something I need to tell you too," he said finally. Isabella waited, her eyes fixed on his face. "I'm not as poor as you think I am," Thomas said. "This farm, this simple life, it's a choice, not a necessity." Isabella frowned, confused. "I don't understand." Thomas stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "My full name is Thomas Edward Whitmore. My grandfather was Edmund Whitmore, who built the Whitmore textile mills. When he died, he left everything to my father, and when my father died 3 years ago, he left it all to me." Isabella stared at him in shock. You're wealthy." "Very," Thomas admitted. "The mills practically run themselves now, with excellent managers in place. Profits go into accounts I rarely touch. I could buy the finest house in Millbrook tomorrow if I wanted to, but why?" Isabella gestured around at the modest cottage, the small garden, the simple life he had built here. "Because I tried living that other life," Thomas explained. "After my father died, I spent a year in London attending social functions, meeting the right people, doing what was expected of the heir to the Whitmore fortune, and I was miserable. Every day felt hollow, meaningless. The people who courted my friendship only wanted my money, and the women who showed interest in me only wanted my name and my fortune." He walked over to the fence that bordered his property, looking out over the rolling hills beyond. "So I came here to this place my mother loved when she was a girl. I bought this small farm under a false name and told everyone I was a poor man trying to make an honest living. For the first time in my life, I felt real." Isabella joined him at the fence, her mind clearly racing. "So when I told you about my situation, about the danger, I realized that you were in a position to understand something that no one else in my life ever has," Thomas finished. "What it's like to feel trapped by other people's expectations. What it's like to want something real instead of something that just looks good on the surface." They stood in silence for a moment, both processing these revelations. Finally, Isabella spoke. "So what happens now?" Thomas turned to face her fully. "That depends on what you want to happen. I can give you money to start a new life anywhere. You choose. I can use my real name and my influence to protect you from your father and Richard Blackwood. Or, Isabella prompted. "Or you can stay here with me, not as a guest hiding from scandal, but as my partner in building something real, like something that belongs to us, not to our families or society's expectations." Isabella's eyes searched his face. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Thomas felt his heart racing, but he pressed on. "I'm asking you to choose the life you want, not the life others want for you. If that life includes me, then yes, I'm asking you to marry me. But if it doesn't, then I'll help you find whatever you're looking for." Isabella was quiet for a long time, staring out over the peaceful landscape. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "I ran away from one wedding yesterday," she said. "I swore I would never again let anyone else choose my future for me." Thomas felt his heart sink, thinking she was about to reject him. "But this," Isabella continued, turning to meet his eyes, "this would be my choice. Not my father's, not society's, not even yours, really, mine." Hope flickered in Thomas's chest. "What do you choose?" Isabella smiled. The same transformative smile that had taken his breath away the night before. "I choose this life. I choose honest work and dirty hands, and a man who values kindness over social standing. I choose you, Thomas Whitmore, poor farmer or wealthy heir. It doesn't matter to me which." Thomas felt something break open inside his chest, a joy so pure and overwhelming that he thought he might collapse from the weight of it. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Your father, the scandal, ... My father will have to learn to live with disappointment," Isabella said firmly. "And as for scandal, let them talk. I'd rather be scandalous and happy than respectable and miserable." Thomas reached for her hands, holding them gently in his own. "I love you," he said, the words coming easily, naturally. "I know it's too soon to say that, but I do. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you made my house feel like a home in just one night." "I love you too," Isabella whispered. "I didn't know it was possible to fall in love so quickly, but I did. Somewhere between the storm and the sunrise, I fell completely in love with you. They were married a month later in the small church in the village, with Mrs. Patterson and the local pastor as witnesses. Isabella wore a simple dress she had sewn herself. Thomas wore his best shirt and the jacket his mother had pressed for special occasions. There were no society guests, no elaborate reception, no newspaper announcements, but there was love pure, honest, chosen love, and there was joy. And there was the promise of a future built on their own terms. Thomas kept his secret about his wealth for several more months, until he was certain that Isabella loved him for who he was, not what he could provide.